What's up, guys? Welcome back. If you're new, my name is Chris, and here we discuss products, places, and things that help us live a better life. Today, I'm gonna do something a little bit different. I'm gonna take a few comments and questions and messages that I've received, and I'm gonna answer them in a live format. Some questions that I felt could use a further explanation besides just a response in a comment or a direct message. The first question is, which version of the Crux did you get / are you talking about? So maybe I should clarify this. I didn't go out and buy like the SWorks, the Pro, or the Expert build of the Crux. I bought an SWorks frame set and I took existing parts from my open upper. So it's kind of a mix between SRAM Force and SRAM Red. So it's not quite an SWorks build, it's not quite a Pro build, it kind of lies somewhere in between. Even the wheels are the Zip 303Ss, which are kind of a budget wheel, they're a little bit heavier. So it falls somewhere between the SWorks and the Pro, but overall I've been very pleased with it. But to answer the question, I'm always referring to kind of my custom build based on some parts that I had from a previous bike. This next question piggybacks on the first. Any thoughts between the Crux SWorks and Pro? 12R or 10R, referring to the carbon layup. $2,000 for 100 grams, referring to the weight difference between the Pro and the SWorks frames. So this is a really good question because I think if I were to have gone out and bought a complete bike, it would have been really difficult for me to go out and spend $12,000 on the full SWorks build. I think the Pro build makes a lot more sense money-wise. It's still, even then, a very expensive bike. But I think when it boils down to it, for the average rider, the difference between the SWorks and the Pro is going to be mostly negligible. And sure, you can put it on the scale and it's gonna weigh less. Sure, it might be a hair stiffer. But for real world, being out there riding, I don't think it's gonna be that big of a difference. So that leads to the next question. You know, fact 10R or 12R carbon layup. In theory, I think the 12R is a little bit stiffer and a little bit lighter. I've never ridden a 10R, so I can't tell you the difference between the two, but I think for most people, you wouldn't really be able to tell the difference. So then the question is, an additional $2,000 to save 100 grams on a frame set. When you put it like that, I think there are much better ways that you could spend $2,000. I'm sure there's a much less expensive way that you could save 100 grams somewhere in the build, maybe in the wheel set, maybe in the components, but I think $2,000 is pretty steep. So if I had to choose between the SWorks build or the Pro build, of course I would love to get the SWorks build, but the reality is it's just not really affordable. So I would probably go with the Pro build. The next question is one that I got quite often, and that is, what chain are you running? It's not a flat top nor the Eagle Rainbow chain. How is shifting performance? So first of all, I have to say to all you who caught that, that's really good. I didn't even really think that it would be a big deal. I didn't think so many people would comment on the chain. So it is the XX1 chain. It came from my 1x setup that was previously on the upper. And when I was running the 1x on the Crux, that's just a chain that I had. So I kept it on there as I was running the double chain ring up front. So it is the XX1 chain. It's just not the rainbow one, it's the black one. The shifting performance is okay to good. I wouldn't say it's great. I have a red chain here that I'm gonna swap out, so I should get better shifting performance. I just haven't had a time to swap the chain, frankly. So that's it on the chain. This next one is not so much a question as it is a comment or response to my video about the Crux being the only bike that you need. He says, for the price of the Crux, I can have 5 bikes that I only need. Yeah, I mean, look, that's a fair response to my video about the Crux being the only bike that you need. I don't think there's anybody that would argue that you could go get 5 bikes and build them up and they would be okay. And you could do everything that you need to do on those bikes. But look, I like to think about bikes in terms of, hey, I'm gonna have this bike for a year, 2 years, 3 years. And yes, the bike is going to depreciate. How much? I don't know. But let's say that it only ends up costing $50 or $100 a month to have this bike. Is there a way that I could save $50 or $100 elsewhere in my life so that I could have this bike and enjoy it? Yeah, I'm sure there are. And so when I start thinking about this bike purchase through that lens, that's how I justify buying the Crux. Keeps me healthy, gets me outside, gets me social, and it's a lot of fun. So hey, if the mentality is, hey, you could get 5 bikes for the price of that, I get it. For me, I love the bike, I understand the numbers, and that's how I wanted to build it up. This next one's about the van, and it's one that I get all the time in various words. Curious how your fuel burn has changed with the modifications. And he's referring to all the modifications to the van, the interior build as well as the exterior accessories that we added on. So when I first bought the van, I drove it home from Phoenix. So Phoenix to Orange County, I think I averaged between 19 and 19.5 miles per gallon. A couple weeks later, we added on the tires and wheels. The gas mileage immediately dropped to around 16, 17 miles per gallon. And as soon as the build was done and we added a couple thousand pounds of weight, the mileage dropped to around 13, 14 miles per gallon. If I see that we've gotten 14 miles per gallon on a trip, like I'm stoked, right? Like I'm like my dad was when I was a kid, and he'd be like tracking the miles per gallon. I'm now like that guy. But if we get 13 and a half, that's pretty normal. That being said, I'm not driving that slow. If I were to drive 55, 60 miles an hour, I'm sure I could get right back up to that 15, 16 miles per gallon. But I'm typically going the speed of traffic. So if we're driving up to 395 to Mammoth, I'm going 70, 75. Rarely do I push it up to 80, but between 70 and 75. And if you just look at the aerodynamics of that top roof rack, it catches a lot of wind. I mean, you can feel it dragging when it's windy out there. So that's kind of the fuel burn, or the miles per gallon, or the fuel efficiency of the van with the current build. Would I change anything? Maybe if there was like a more efficient way for it to be aerodynamic, I don't know. But I really like the van the way that it is. So I think it's just one of those things that when you buy a big van like that and you build it out, that's just kind of the nature of the beast. It's gonna be something that eats a lot of gas. And with gas prices being the way that they are, kind of makes you second guess sometimes when you wanna go travel somewhere. You definitely pull out the calculator and go, oh, okay, it's gonna cost us $400 to drive there. Yeah, that's just the nature of the beast. Next question. Enjoyed your review of necessary changes. Just curious. I am in investigational stage of van acquisition and build. Rough price on those upgrades if you don't mind. This is also another question that I get all the time, and basically the point blank question is, how much did it cost to build your van? So I think the good or the rough rule of thumb on this is that the van cost around $60,000, $65,000, and I think they've gone up quite a bit since I bought mine a year ago. The build can cost anywhere between $60,000 and $80,000. Now we made ours very simple. If you've seen our build, we didn't want water. We didn't want a lot of the electrical features. We wanted something that was very basic because we wanted our family to have kind of the basic camping experience. And we didn't want our family spending a ton of time in the van. Some of these vans have like TVs inside and game consoles and all these things and air conditioning. I think that's all fine and dandy. We just wanted something that was a little bit easier to travel in. It was kind of like a couple steps above a tent, and the van really does that for us. So if you're looking for a van out there, I think that's kind of a good rule of thumb. 60 for the van, 60 for the build, somewhere around that range, and you'll get what you want. I believe the prices have gone up quite a bit. The last time that I checked, people are trying to get crazy amounts for these vans. One of the reasons is that it turns out that Mercedes has discontinued their relationship with the drivetrain manufacturer for these four-wheel drives. So they're moving to a more like civilian formatic format that is found on like the G-Wagon and some of the sedans and stuff like that. So the true high-low four-wheel drive system is not going to be in the next generation of van. At least that's what I read on Expedition Portal. So I think the value of these four-wheel drive vans is going to go up quite a bit. Some are comparing it to the Vanagon Synchro, which is like the classic old Vanagon that has four-wheel drive. That's really, really cool. And now those go for probably more than they cost originally, and they're 40 years old, something like that. So that's my thought on the van build, but I think it's worth every penny. This next one is not so much a question as it is a comment, but I believe it's a comment that deserves further discussion. It's in response to my video about the exterior build options. And this person said, "Your wife must be very understanding." Yeah, that's a fair response to that video. The reality is that my wife was involved in every step of that van build. We had this whole spreadsheet with all of our options, all of the costs. We listed everything out. We put together like a wants list for me and a wants list for her, and then kind of decided where we landed and talked about it. We had big discussions about how we were going to outfit this van. One of the things that was never on my original sheet was the diesel heater. I always thought, hey, look, if it's cold, we'll just throw some extra sleeping bags or blankets in the van and everybody will get through the night. Her argument was, and she was right, of course, was, look, we've got little kids. We want them to be comfortable. And for ourselves, we want to be comfortable as well. So we went with the Webasto diesel heater. And now, after having the van for almost a year, I can't imagine not having that heater. We've camped when it's been 20, 25, 30 degrees at night, and that thing cranks. I mean, the van is so well insulated that it can be 30 degrees outside and it'll be 70, 75 degrees inside of the van. It's fantastic. So look, my wife was right, and I think including her on the discussion was the best thing that I ever did when it came to the van. I'd encourage you to do the same. Include your significant other in the build process. It makes it a lot more fun, and frankly, they're going to think of things that you're just not thinking of. And so when it comes time to do the entire build, and when it's done, you kind of look at it and it feels like it's the whole family's build and not just something that you went out and decided to do. So yeah, was my wife understanding? She was very understanding, but she was also with me every step of the way, and I'd encourage you to do the same. This next question is one that really hits home. It says, as an aside, I'm on the verge of giving up on road biking and going 100% gravel. Too many angry drivers in WNC. How do you rationalize the risk of being on the roads these days, friend? Yeah, so first of all, thanks for that question, and that comment. It's one that I think about all the time. Every single time I go out for a bike ride, I ask myself, how can I be more safe on the road to ensure that I return home safely to my family, right? Some of the things that I like to do to ensure that I'm safe on the road are, first and foremost, I always ride with a tail light, a flashing tail light. I use the Nog Cobber. It's kind of curved, and so you get, I don't know, I think it's 270 degrees of view. So the cars can kind of see it on the side as well as behind you. I always wear a white helmet. I've only got one Prevail helmet left. It's black. I only use it for mountain biking, and it's very rare. Other than that, I always wear a white helmet because white is so much more visible. When it comes to kits, I try to wear kits that are brighter colors, or I wear a bright colored vest, especially as we're getting into winter out here. The other thing that I do is I always try to communicate with drivers. You know, in my neighborhood, we've got all these kids who ride e-bikes, and they just rip up and down the streets at like 20, 25 miles an hour. They blow through stop signs. They're on their cell phones. It's nerve-wracking to watch these kids. I always try to communicate with drivers. When I'm getting close somewhere, I try to either make eye contact or use my hand to make hand gestures. I think it's important that we communicate with the drivers around us. And I'd say that as a whole for the cycling community, I think that's something that we need to be a little bit better at. I don't want to say that we shouldn't feel like we own the road or that drivers need to always get away or give us space, but I do think that we need to do a little bit better job of not being so aggressive. And I think we need to do a better job of being a little bit more predictable when it comes to riding. If you're riding in an area that has cars kind of sporadically spaced and you're swerving in and out of cars, I mean, imagine what that's like as a driver behind you. You're not quite sure, as a driver, you're not quite sure what the cyclist in front of you is going to do. So I think we as cyclists need to do a little bit better job of being safe. The other thing that I always try to do is I always try to ride at times when there are fewer cars on the road. I've said before that I like to ride between 5 and 7 a.m. frankly because it's a lot safer out. At that time, most people are just waking up. No one's taking their kids to school yet. No one's rushing off to work, and so there are just fewer cars on the road. I also like to always try to ride with someone. Chances are if I can't ride with someone, I'm just in the garage on the trainer by myself. Sure, on a 30, 40, 50 mile ride, there may be 5 or 10 miles where I'm by myself until I meet up with a friend or a group, but for the most part, I try to ride with people. And I always try to ride in groups whenever possible. I believe there's safety in numbers out on the road. When you're with a big group of 5, 10, 15, 20 guys, you're much, much safer. And you've also got a support system there. If anything were to ever happen, you've got people who are there by your side. So that's kind of how I justify riding on the road. I think it's a two-way street between cyclists and drivers, but I also think that just generally, we can do more as cyclists to be visible. We can make better moves, we can obey the laws, do all that kind of stuff. And I know that's not sexy and it's not fun, but I just believe that that is what we need to do. And I think that we need to do it for the greater community. And that's a wrap for this video. Thanks so much for watching. See you soon.